All right. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. What's going on? So, for those of you who don't know, my name is Jessica Harris, and I'm super pumped and excited to have you all here, especially on the channel, Right with Jess. For those of you who don't know, I am also a blogger, I am an author, a dynamic speaker, podcaster, y'all. So many things, right? I'm also a mom to three amazing little people who I always say don't look like me, but they tend to act like me on most occasions. And today we're going to be diving into the importance of storytelling and really how you are able to turn your pain into a message. Now, I get it. Some people have gone through like the woes of life, right? And sometimes those woes cause you to feel like you can't speak up. Or better yet, maybe the situation that you were in, you were explicitly told, don't share this. We don't talk about it. I know there's some families where the secret kind of stays a secret and no one talks about it, and that causes internal hurt, that causes internal wounds to keep going through generations and generations and generations because no one was bold enough to begin speaking out against it. And I understand that sometimes that cultural norm becomes transactional, right? So you go from one person feeling this way to the next person, so forth and so on. But we're here to break that cycle. We're here to break those pieces off of you and to give you the understanding that sharing your story is super important for a few reasons. Number one of the biggest things that I personally have come to learn when it comes to sharing my story is that I no longer feel alone. Oftentimes, when we are going through life, we feel like we're the only one going through whatever the case may be for you, right? Whether that's you being in a situation where you're in a domestic violence situation, whether that's you somebody who has gone through what is it called, when you've been raped or molested, right? Whether it's somebody who has gone through all types of stuff, right? And listen, you name it, you've been through it, it's understandable. Maybe you're someone who lost a job, maybe you're somebody who lost a home. There's so many circumstances, right, that could have taken place in your life. There's people who have had to deal with incest. Listen, I understand some of those topics are super heavy, and I understand that some of those topics get to the point where you don't even want to discuss it with other people because you're like, who's gonna relate to me? Who's gonna understand me? Who's gonna be able to really like help me through what I'm going through? So, what I wanted to go ahead and introduce was two parts to it. One, y'all already know, especially y'all, forgive me, my eye has like hair in it. I just did my hair. And apparently the lashes or something is getting into it. But, anyways, one of the things that comes to mind is getting into therapy. I know for sure there is a thing called trauma based induced therapy, something to that effect. So, therapy helps because those are traumatic events that have taken place. Don't be afraid to jump into therapy. And I'm starting this conversation off with that part because I do feel like it's something that we kind of look at as a taboo topic and no one wants to talk about therapy. This conversation isn't about therapy, but I want you to know that therapy is definitely open and available to you. And it definitely helps, especially when you find the right therapist. So that's for starters. Number two, take your situation into prayer with God. And you could do that first and then therapy or vice versa. I am a believer who believes in prayer and therapy is a great combination because God gives us strategy, God gives us healing, God is able to uproot things, but then there's also some practical pieces that we may need to work through daily, and that comes with a therapist. I do believe that God also blesses people to be counselors, right? That He places it on their heart to be kingdom counselors because He understands that Christians are needed in that area, right? They're needed in that sphere of influence. So I wanted to just bring that up really quickly because there's no way in the world that I'm personally going to say, hey, go jump in and tell your story to the whole world without you trying to do some steps of healing first. And the reason why I say that part is because for me, when I started my writing journey, writing and journaling came from a period of my life where things were going upside down. When I was writing and when I was journaling the trauma that I was going through. I was journaling those experiences. Like these were real live experiences for me. Almost losing my son. Like I literally watched the doctors having to put a bag over his face to help him to breathe because he wasn't able to breathe on his own. I had to watch the doctors rush him to the PICU, pediatric intensive care unit, to get emergency rounds of blood transfusions because his body barely had any blood inside of it. So when I tell you that even traumatic experiences like that I'm watching, right, is something that, yes, I can share, I can talk about it now today, but that's because there was healing that took place in the middle. So today's conversation is going to be about how can you turn your pain into a message. And I kind of introduced the idea of therapy and I introduced the idea of prayer. And the reason why I'm bringing those to the forefront first is because I feel as though when we think about turning our pain into a message, we want to have a foundation laid out in front of us. We want to be able to have some pillars, right? I look at it as like safety nets in a sense, where we know that if anything happens in our emotional state, or as we're going through the experiences, or even if you're having to relive something that maybe you buried from years ago, right? That you have a support system in front of you. I don't want you to just step out and do it. I need you to take your time, because I know that as you begin to go through this journey of healing, right, as you're sharing, as you're writing, as you're speaking about it, that there's going to be a lot of emotions that begin to unravel. And sometimes we don't realize what emotions are connected to the experiences and to the pain that we've endured. I feel like sometimes we kind of look at it as like, oh, I'm good. That was 10 years ago. Like, I'm not even phased by that no more. Like, okay, so why don't you talk about it? Because who's going to listen to me talk about X, Y, and Z? And then when they do begin to speak on whatever the situations that happen to them, right? Maybe you're someone who got molested as a kid and you begin talking about it. All of a sudden, all of these emotions that were buried begin to come rivaling up out of you. And that's the reason why I said have a support in place first. Because storytelling, we see a lot of people, I don't wanna say, like, they kinda, like, spew trauma everywhere, but it kinda looks like that, right? And I don't watch TikTok, so I can't speak from that perspective, but I know a lot of people post video from there. But I know that when people talk, sometimes you can hear the wounds that haven't been healed yet. When people talk, you can hear the areas in their lives where they should have taken some time first to really go through the healing before they actually began to speak. And it's not saying that speaking about it wasn't a part of their healing, but you can tell where there was areas where they needed to really gather themselves first in. And the reason why I'm bringing that part up is because a lot of people are sharing their day-to-day lives. They're sharing what they're going through. They're sharing, the ups, the downs, and the in between. But I don't see a lot of people talking about the healing in the middle. I don't see a lot of people talking about how it's been able to help them. Yes, maybe you sharing your story made you go viral. Yes, you maybe sharing your story allowed other people to connect with you, which is great, right? That's not wrong. But what about the healing that you needed for the journey that you experienced? What about the healing that you needed for what it was that you gone through? Have you allowed yourself the time and the opportunity to experience that healing and also be able to talk about it, right? Because when I was writing out the stuff regarding my son, y'all, I was trying to like write a book at the same time it was happening with him in the hospital. And I promise you, I kept getting stuck. I couldn't get the words out. I kept breaking down. Tears would just overcome me. And it just felt like it was too much. And the reality for me was that it was too much too soon. I was going through the midst of it, and at the same time thinking about this would be an amazing book to write about, because I wanted to talk about the healing because that he experienced, and I wanted to talk about just how God saved his life. Like, I just thought it was such a powerful story that I wanted to share, but I wasn't taking into account where I was mentally and emotionally and spiritually at the same time. So when I think about the art of storytelling, when I think about the ways in which I wanted to share this story, I had to dial back. Maybe me starting off with a book wasn't where I actually could start off with, and it wasn't. What I didn't realize was that my storytelling actually was the text messages that I gave to friends and family who were on our group chat, and it was telling them the story of what was going on with him. And I'm gonna tell you right now, when I gave those few messages, I made it clear, please don't respond back. Please don't say nothing to me. Please don't reach out. Like, I didn't want nothing. So clearly, even though I was sharing, I wasn't ready for the critique. I wasn't ready for the feedback. I wasn't ready for my life to really be put on display. Even though I was willing to share, I wasn't ready for what came with that territory. And sometimes I feel like people are so excited to share about their stories, their journeys, and experiences. But are you taking the time to heal? Are you taking the time to take in what that experience really involved? Are you taking the time to understand that this territory comes with responsibility? Right? Because there's going to be people who are going to agree with you and people who don't agree with you. And there's going to be people who are going to be all up in your business, and you're going to need to have the boundaries to say, okay, maybe I've shared X, but that is all that I'm sharing here. Move on to the next subject, please. Right? So having that understanding in advance, I feel like is necessary. And I feel like there's a responsibility that we carry to protect ourselves and to protect our peace, especially when it comes to sharing our stories and how we turn our pain into messages. Now, that is the foundational component that I wanted to bring out. The phase two of this is this: when you're taking your story, when you're turning your pain into a message, I want you to also look at not just the story of what you experience, but are there any lessons? Are there any patterns? Are there any behaviors that you are now recognizing hindsight, right? Is there anything there within that story that's highlighted to you that you can now ask God to, hey, this area seems to be highlighted. Can you just explore this a little bit more for me? What is it about this particular area, Lord God, of my life that you're bringing out in a different way that I want to see? Because oftentimes we go through things and we share them from our level of understanding, not realizing that maybe, just maybe, there's a level of understanding or clarity, better yet, that God wants to bring out. Maybe there's a group of people that God is like, listen, I'm highlighting this story to you because not only do I want you to share and talk about it, but maybe these are the people that are related to your purpose. Maybe these are the people or the community that I want you to get in alignment with, or I want you to change policies with, or I want you to be able to do some more work with. There was this woman who I had met a few years ago, and she had been sexually assaulted. And I remember hearing her story, and it was devastating to hear what took place with her. And she went on this whole journey with the police and trying to get things rectified and trying to find the assailant and all this stuff. And I don't remember offhand if they ever did find the assailant. But what I do remember is that she took that story and she went into healing with God. She went into healing with therapy. But not only that, she also turned her pain into a message, so much so that she was able to actually bring her story into the limelight of legislators and policymakers. She was able to bring her story into the limelight of other police officers and their academies and helping them on how they are able to treat sexual assault victims. So even though her story started off as a super painful experience, she went through the journey of healing. She went through the journey of talking about it, of writing about it, of sharing it, of expressing it, to then allowing God to say, and because you have gone through it, I'm going to use it. Right? We know that yes, there are things that take place in our lives that aren't necessarily what God said this must have happened to you, and that was my plan. No, but we understand that he will use the very situation for our good. So now I look at her and I see this woman of God who went from being this woman who was going through these emotions, going through these feelings, going through all of this, becoming an author, becoming a coach, becoming the woman she desired to be, empowering others, but still having this almost uncertainty because of what she had experienced, now being able to fully blossom and the woman that God called her to be. When we recognize that our pain literally can turn into the very mission that leads our purpose, we walk in it differently. When I was able to watch her and see the growth that she had taken place in her life, I understood that God wasn't just using this one situation to do a once over and done, but He was making this into an entire movement that had impact across several states within our country. And I feel like when we understand the weight of our assignment and what we have gone through and why healing is necessary, then we understand the power in the story that we tell. She wasn't afraid to tell her story, but I can imagine the reservations. I can imagine having to come out of it. I can imagine the hurt and the trauma that was experienced with it. But at the same time, I'm able to bear witness of the fruit that was able to be birthed through it all. Because she allowed herself to receive healing, because she allowed herself to surrender to God, because she allowed her story to be made in the glory and in the image that God had for her, and not allowing it to weigh her down, but to instead to bring her up in the ways in which the Lord had purposed and positioned it to. I feel like one of the things that we have to recognize as storytellers, as listen, as men and women of God, is that because God gave you a story, because God gave you experiences, right, that we are enduring, whether it's good, bad, the ugly in between, right? Because there's stuff that happens in life, we have to be obedient and understanding that when He's calling you to a particular area, He's not doing it because He's saying this might work. He's doing it because He understands it will. He's doing it because He understands there's a door here that He wants to open for you. And if you would open yourself to receiving that door, then you could see all the things that He has for you. I want to highlight that part because when we think about turning our pain into messages, oftentimes we overlook how big the message really is. We may think like, oh, well, I'm sharing because I've seen it. Where people are sharing because they're getting back at somebody. I've seen it where people are sharing because they genuinely do care, right? And then we've seen it because they understand that by sharing, they're positioning themselves into a bigger arena. Because they're like, listen, I'm sharing my story because I know that my story is important. And I know that my story is important because God already told me share what it is that I'm going through. So this way y'all can see the real life, raw life of it. But then as my come up happens, you can't be mad because you got to see me from where I was to where I'm headed. When God sits there and does a move like that on somebody, you have to understand that there was layers, right? Bricks upon bricks upon bricks that were laid out for this person. And those bricks were the stepping stones that this individual took in order to get to where they are today. Oftentimes we see stories going viral, but no one understands what was the story before that moment. What was they going through before they got that viral hit? What was life like before this particular section of their lives took place? And when we begin to go backwards, we realize like, oh, they was already going through it. They was already in the midst of it. They was already in the thick of it. It just so happened that now they're in a position where things can move differently. That now they're in a position where things are getting to move in a sense speedily. But truth be told, that speed looks like that only now, but there was already a story, a testimony that was brewing in the background. So I feel like when we can begin to look at it from that perspective, our ways that we see their stories being told differ. And think about it. Some of these people that you hear telling their stories, they should be legit writing books about them. And some of them are, and some of them aren't. Some of them are okay with leaving their reels as reels and them telling these mini stories, but them not realizing that what story they're sharing could easily turn into a podcast. It could easily turn into coaching. It could easily turn into books. It could easily turn into all these different things. Why? Because one experience, one story has the ability to shift into multiple streams and avenues. That's what God does. He takes that one story and He will shift it into multiple streams and avenues because He understands that there is growth that takes place, right? Your story may start at A, but then there's B through Z that takes place. So where you are here may be where you started, and then the next phase is the next part of your life, and then the next phase is the next part, and it continues to grow. So as you share your story, right? As you begin to talk about it, as you begin to acknowledge what it is that you've gone through, think about the ways in which you are able to connect with other people. Making connections with other people brings you into a position of phase three, right? Where you are able to bear witness of other people receiving their breakthrough. I have always learned over the last few years that whatever I go through, whatever I'm experiencing, is not just solely for me, but it is connected to the breakthrough of those that are connected to me. right? There's a promise that God gave unto me, but I know that there are people that are attached to me that in order for me to get to where I'm going, I have to share. And in order for me to share, I have to be able to receive the healing and those experiences, to be free to express, to be free to share, to be free from the shame, the guilt, and any despair that would try to come upon it. So that way the Lord can go ahead and get the glory through it. I have to be able to say, God, this is where we're at right now. This is what I'm sharing. This is where I want the people to understand, because this way, as they move all about in their journeys, as they see how things may or may not be working just yet, because I believe there's always a yet in there, then they'll begin to see the fluidity of how God is able to move. When we can begin to take into that account what it is that is taking place in our lives, we begin to bear witness to things differently. And I feel like that's something that we all have to recognize, right? That just because it happened to us doesn't mean that God won't use it. So, for those of you, right? Maybe you're 20 minutes into this video, hopefully, we'll see, right? And you're like, listen, I want to share my story. I want to get out of my comfort zone. I want to speak up. I want to do something different. Then get on my email list. Period. Get on the email list and get in the community on Patreon, because this is the community here. And it's not just about writing books, we're all things media, like all things media. Get into the Patreon, get into the community there, and understand the value that it's going to bring to you, because there is so much there of that you're going to be wanting to utilize in this season and in this hour, that's going to allow you to be able to do the things that you're called to do. Sharing your story in one way is great, but there's more than one way to share your story. So when you can get out of your comfort zone, when you can say, you know what, God, I'm ready to stretch, I'm ready to move, I'm ready to go. Come on now, get the little kinks out your neck, like I can do this. Then let's meet up, because this is a season where your story will be amplified, where your voice will meet those who is connected to. This is a season where it will be time for you to show up in the very spaces and places where you have always been called to move in. This is that season that you're in right now. No more are you going to be sitting down in the background. No more are you going to be sitting there trying to figure it out. No more are you going to be sitting there twiddling your thumbs about the story that you know that has been blessed inside of you to be able to transform the lives of other people. No longer will you sit on your hands on the very thing that God is telling you that it will propel you forward in. This is your season to launch it. This is your season to move in it. This is your season. Period. Case closed. Y'all, my hair is still in my face. Anyways, if you have gotten to this point of the video, definitely go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. I should have said at the beginning. My bad. Anyways, like, share, and subscribe. Let somebody who you know that is like, listen, it's time for you to get it together. It's time for you to grow. It's time for you to develop. Let this be their season right now where they do it. Period. Case closed. Peace and blessings. Have a great day, everybody.